In November, over 12,000 attendees gathered in Las Vegas for Health 2022, the preeminent event for health innovation. Now in its fifth year, the event seeks to accelerate engagement across the health ecosystem through an interactive format that encourages deeper connections and thought-provoking discussions. As the conference concluded, I had the chance once again to sit down and chat with two of my favorite colleagues, James Aita, the Director of Strategy and Business Development for Metacomp Systems, and Vinton, Account Director at Amendola Communications. Take a listen as we give our thoughts on the event and what the future may hold.
Well, here we are at Health 22 in Las Vegas, and back with me again, as we like to do at every conference we're at, James Aita from Metacomp Systems and Vinton from Amendola Communications. I wanted to say, oh gosh, the band is back together again, but actually with all the music around here, I kind of feel like we're on a reunion tour.
I'll take it.
Like every 6 months we have a reunion tour.
Works for me.
Absolutely.
Well, before we start talking about Health 22 here in Vegas, of course, I start every episode wanting to know if you had to describe yourself as a tagline, what would it be in keeping in the spirit of Health 22? Let's hear a Health 22 tagline. Ms. Vinton, I'm going to start with you.
I would say champion of patient-centered, frictionless care.
Frictionless care. Yeah. I like
it's a common theme I've been hearing nonstop, and I love that it's patient-centered. It's kind of shifting the model of what works in the workflow to what works for the patient and the caregiver.
Right. James?
So for me, I always care about data, and this is all about taking data into the future and what you can do with it, which is there.
Yeah. So I think that is, since Health's inception in 2017, really, I think, focused in on the innovation side of healthcare, right? And so what you're both talking about, I think, from a tagline, sort of fits in with what they really kind of hit home year in and year out. So let's talk about Health 22, and let's certainly talk about, if we can, step back. And I'd love to talk about actually if you were at the opening remarks for the conference.
Yes, I was at the opening remarks, but I was also at the first panel, which
was
the morning.
That was in the morning.
Before the opening remarks happened. And what I loved about the first panel, it started off with Aran Hadi from Med City News. She was moderating the panel, and she shared her patient story. And she said, this was my experience with my brother and having to caregive for him when he was sick with cancer and he died. And it was a terrifying, terrible experience for myself and my family. In fact, we got a bill for an ambulance ride after he died because they weren't in network. An ambulance, not in network.
Right.
This is the problem. And it really set the tone for the conference. And I think really kind of amplifying the patient story in some of what's happening in healthcare was really impactful, and it gave permission to the panelists to also share their stories and really kind of bring about this kind of culture of let's talk about this problem and let's talk about how it relates to us personally, in addition to bringing in innovation to the process. Where can it fit in? Where can we make care more frictionless?
Yeah. How'd you start your conference?
So I did not make it to the opening remarks, but I did make it to Mickey Tripathi, the National Coordinator for Health, so ONC, part of the White House. And, he was really talking about the trajectory of health infrastructure, if you will, in the United States over the years, with ARRA, and finally now with the anti-information blocking rules that were part of 21st Century Cures Act, and that going into effect October 6th of this year, and what that means sort of going forward for this entire industry to finally really be turning on the spigots of sharing clinical data and realizing that dream that we've been hearing about since the 90s about having a nation that finally shares the data between all the different actors. And so I think we're going to see that a lot more than it has been before, but we're already seeing that with all sorts of different models inside the hall in the exhibit hall here at Health 22.
And truly, data is the new oil. And I think at Health, we've seen not only is healthcare data more important than ever in healthcare IT, but in pharma as well, and investors are taking notice. So the audience here, I've really seen it be, a third pharma, a third health IT, and a third vendors trying to reach those folks.
Yeah. I started my conference this year at the opening remarks, and they did this at Vive in March, but they really began that opening remarks with some sobering statistics about healthcare, right? And really sort of, at the end of these very sobering statistics, asked the question, is healthcare better today than it was 20 years ago? 20 years ago, when the start of, what I would call the, very beginnings of this sort of digital transformation of how healthcare is delivered in this country. And that question has really stuck with me. Now they ended on a high note where they brought that little girl from the Ukraine, that subway singing the song from Frozen, and went viral around the world. Obviously, and they brought her in, and that was a very beautiful thing, right? So I was glad to see that. But the question still stuck in my mind, right? For 20 years have gone by, and in the last 20 years, where a lot has happened. Since early 2000, it was George W. Bush, you may recall, who really, just from a legislative standpoint, really began this process, and basically started the ONC and whatnot. David Brailer and these names that people who have been around, recognize. And that question made me think. COVID aside, 20 years of technology and, quote, innovation, incentives through the government. As a patient, is my health care any better today generally than it was 20 years ago?
I would say that the focus for the past 20 years has been physically saving lives, not necessarily, making the process seamless or making the process better for patients and caregivers, but physically saving lives. And I think people are realizing that's not enough anymore. You got to save lives, but it also has to be an experience that is a good experience for all involved, for the patient, for the caregiver, for the physician. Everybody needs to have an improved experience. It's not just about saving lives, it's about that experience in addition to saving lives. So has saving lives gotten better? I would say so. I mean, there's been tremendous progress in oncology, many specialties, but in terms of the experience of care, that's where I think we're faltering, and I think that's where virtual care that's been developed recently is changing the game.
Well, so the other thing, I mean, one of the things that Mickey Tripathi said in his opening remarks, or his remarks were, when this was originally sold to the nation, transitioning into health technology, one of the major things was we are seeing over 100,000 deaths due to medical errors. Right. Medication related was a huge one. I would think at this point, and I don't know the numbers, but certainly with the advent of drug-to-drug interaction checking and, SureScripts and RX Hub bringing all of the patient's medications to any given provider at any time, those are the kinds of things that there's no question that advances have been there. And so I am certain that number has changed dramatically from that standpoint. But to Grace's point, the idea of is care frictionless? Is there seamless transitions of care between one provider and the next? Absolutely not. And so, I think both of our taglines today kind of speak to that. It's, can you get the data from one place to another, to the person on the other end, whether that's the patient or the provider, and can you make those transitions of care seamless and frictionless? One of the words that I heard thrown around from a friend of mine, Amy Gleason, who both were friends with, they talk about care navigators. And so, that's one of the ways that you can make that transition more seamless and frictionless, is to have someone helping you, a physical person helping you navigate. And that's a gigantic gap that, exists. Can you automate some of that? Can you make that virtual to a certain extent? These are new ideas that we're hearing tossed around a lot here.
Yeah, I love the fact that you both, understand the history of what's happened in the last 2 decades. I mean, you're actually harkening back to that very famous article, "To err is human." ERR,
that's exactly right. You got it. You
So
knew the reference.
I
Wow.
did know the reference point. I did. But technology, of course, and just perhaps other underlying conditions, and of course COVID, creates other challenges. That obviously, Medicop Systems, your CMO, Dr. Jay Anders, you talk about physician burnout and clinician burnout in general. Let's not forget all clinicians in the front care and the impact that has had with what you're speaking to, Grace, which is about the patient experience. This is the first health that I can remember where there does seem to be more conversation and focus on that patient experience.
Absolutely. The Patient Impact Pavilion has been patient stories all day, every day, and has been how is our technologies impacting the patient, patients telling their stories. It's been incredible to see that. Patients on panels. Also, I'm amazed and thrilled to see so many different voices in addition to the normal CEOs that we would see at a normal event like that. Just speaking on the panels, it's you're seeing nurses, all nurse panels. You're seeing patients included on panels. You're seeing physicians on panels. You're seeing CEOs, and you're seeing investors on panels. You're seeing folks from pharma and health IT coming on and giving their perspectives. And I think that's what health is doing really well. They're not leaving out a voice. They're really trying to amplify every voice, and the pharmacists as well. I've seen PBM panels on PBMs and things to really try to pull out and articulate what is happening in each part of this healthcare ecosphere that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of the investment side of it, we saw this at Vive certainly, and I felt this even more at Health. Is just there's an enormous amount of money coming into this space, and it's looking for these right solutions. I mean, you can just feel it from the food to the evening events to whatever, or the whole experience of this show. There's a ton of money that is looking for what is the right place to put my investment in next in this industry that is 20% of the GDP of the United States.
Right.
So and what I've seen is these new data companies emerging, whether it's your Health Gorilla, Innovacer, Innovalon, these sort of middlemen of data. And in the conversations, again, going back to what Mickey Tripathi was talking, and these organizations are trying to figure out, what do you do with the unintended consequences of sharing this data? Right. Now you've got data from maybe 5 or 6 different actors, and you have to deduplicate, figure out what's relevant, what's not. I mean, these are big problems, and they're very complex problems that are going to take a while to figure out. But there's a lot of opportunity there, I think.
I'm also seeing consumer brands on every corner, which I think is really amplifying. So there's these investors. You're seeing the normal VCs we'd see at a health, but now private equity investors
Private
coming,
equity is here.
which is new and is really starting to take hold in healthcare and healthcare IT. But you're seeing these consumer brands, which makes those investors excited. They see Amazon, they see Google, they see Instacart, they see Yahoo, they see all of these large kind of Google, all these large consumer brands making a play, and they're saying, wow, we have an exit strategy, possibly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got CVS that purchased Aetna. Right. All of these organizations are getting into the home care space and the telehealth space now. So all of them are getting closer and closer to the consumer. If you were further away before, all of these different pieces are getting much more tightly wound together, which is kind of scary too, because is there really a firewall between again, I'm going back to the data getting shared between your insurance company and your pharmacy or your home health care provider? These are, again, really scary, complex issues that we haven't really figured out yet, and I think there's going to be some bad actors before the DOJ kind of separates all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, that could be. I do think here at Health, the fact that it is the healthcare ecosystem, and their model, of course, is we want you talking, networking, going to sessions together, eating, drinking. They're obviously not holding everybody hostage here, but they create this environment that keeps you here, kind of forcing you to talk to people, right?
Yes, and they're really doing it in a way that's entertaining
Yes.
too. There's puppies on every corner, it
Yes.
seems. There's, huge lights. I mean, the stimulation overload.
You want to get your photo taken for a professional headshot?
Yes.
We can take care of you. You need a massage? We got you. You need to get your hair done? We got you.
You want makeup? We got you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, on every corner there's something to do, so they want you to stay.
Experiential,
And
right.
experience. And you eat together. The food is included, which is kind of nice because you don't have to worry
And
about
it's good
going out
food.
and
It's
it's
not
great
just food. It's
and
very
that's
good
another
food.
thing that they did this year is they really marked, dietary.
Yes.
They had a wide variety of offerings for vegetarians, and so I also noticed that in terms of the meals, they had a way more variety this year, which is helpful for folks with dietary restrictions.
Coffee throughout the day because Vive did not have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we are in Vegas, right? And so I mean,
Yes.
I understand the glitz and the musicians and the puppies and there's a lot of sensory input going on as you walk around here. Does that take away from the seriousness of some of like these enormous
You know what's funny? I
challenges?
see a lot of people hanging out in the hallways and chatting.
Yeah, right.
I really think it depends who you ask.
Yes.
I'm entertained by all of that, and
I
I
am
think
too.
if you want to have the investment community here and stakeholders and actors that may not always be in the sort of depths of healthcare IT that we're used to, these are the kinds of things that bring them in. The media people, the investor types, all of that, they definitely respond to that. And I think most people respond to it in one way or another. I will say to your point earlier about having everybody in the hall and having the right people in the hall there all the time, it's noticeable. I mean,
I
we
agree.
came to this show. We've never been to health before. I didn't expect to have a good show. We were more like interested in, are we going to learn what's going on in the industry, and is that going to be valuable to us and maybe make some good connections? Right. Okay. I think we would have been happy with just that. But, we found out even though that our potential customers maybe didn't have a booth, the right people were here walking around, and we were able to make really good connections that are now leads and all that kind of stuff, much more than I was expecting. So,
I mean,
they have product people that aren't normally there. They have business development people that a lot of shows aren't normally there.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's over 9,000 people here. I was shocked to see every panel I was in was totally packed out, and the exhibit hall is quite busy.
Someone told me that their total numbers in the end ended up being north of 12,000.
I heard it was north
Wow.
of 12.
Yeah.
It was north of 12.
That
They got
was
all-
the first number.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge
That
numbers
makes
in the
sense.
last 2 weeks.
Yeah. The other thing too that's interesting, and it's too, we went through Vibe that first year, but let's talk about a little bit the comparison that I'd like to make between HIMSS. Now, HIMSS, of course, is very health IT centric, although they have broadened over the years, of course, international. Health announced this year in the opening remarks of Health Europe in 2024 in Amsterdam. I mean, you can see where they're going. Again, planting the seed in my head because it is more the healthcare ecosystem, and it's not just this, health IT centricity, although health IT, of course, is a big part of anything to do with, healthcare delivery. I began thinking about this. I wonder if health is the conference in a few years that will be the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to compare Vive to health. I mean, not the least reason is because it's like a week before now that they're doing it sort of on purpose, it seems.
Right.
And health has been pretty clear that Vive is supposed to be the direct competitor to HIMSS.
Right.
But, I mean, from what I've heard, and I wasn't here last year, but people I was talking to are saying, this was half the size, if not less, last year. So the growth
I was here last year, and it was absolutely a third the size.
Okay.
I think it was a third. Now, I mean, COVID probably had impact on that.
Yes,
but
true.
The analogy the question I guess I want to ask is, this conference, does it have the ability to scale like a CES, the CES of healthcare, the South by Southwest of healthcare. That's where I'm
Absolutely,
going.
it has the potential, but I will say time and time again, there is room for both, because HIMSS, you're going to get heady educational content that's critical for the industry. Health, you're going to get really important topics that are thought-provoking and important and that lead to connectivity. So I think that there are conversations that you'll have at HIMSS that are different than the conversations you'll have at Health, and both might lead to deals, honestly, to be honest, and it might be with different people.
Yeah, I
and
think
you've got that seasonality. You got the spring shows and the fall shows, which for us is a big deal. Is to have that second connection point at the end of the season or what have you, or just to keep yourself sort of front of mind to your potential customers or contacts or partners or whomever. And so that piece is really valuable. I see this, the fact that Health and Vive really focus on bringing in the financial community, the investment community, and that's very obvious. I think that's a differentiator as well, right? So, I don't know. The conversations that I've had this week, to be perfectly honest, a lot of people are thinking that they're going to start spending their dollars at these two conferences rather than HIMSS, particularly as HIMSS has kind of made it publicly knowledge. It's public knowledge that they're really moving into that consulting space as their focus, and they don't seem to be keeping up with the needs of this generation of people, of what they want to have at a trade show.
Yeah, I do think that to both your points, actually, I think that Vive and HIMSS, even though they are two conferences that are health IT centric, right, are different enough that I think they'll continue to get participation for different reasons. I mean, HIMSS has that big education focus, and and a lot of the frontline clinical people attend. Vive is much like Health, very C-level driven, and of course tied to Chime, so that CIO, Chief Innovation Officer level of attendee, and I think they'll truck along. But
they will steal from each other.
Yeah, they'll
for
be
sure.
Yeah, there'll be some cannibalism. I mean, I love that word. There'll be some cannibalism. But excuse me, I'll edit that out. But I still get back to this question of whether Health, because of the not just diversity and what we were talking about from panelists and attendees, and perhaps even the overall feel, right? Diversity of the vendors and the sessions, and again, this entire healthcare ecosystem, where it can go, can it get to, 50,000 people again, these large scale events.
I honestly think the biggest competition to Health is not HIMSS, it's Health itself. It's like...
That's a great point.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Well, and some of these, like the tech crunches and the other areas where, the other conferences where maybe a more consumer-centric company that happens to be in healthcare, which you've seen some of those here on the floor, that are they going to spend their very limited marketing dollars at this show, or are they going to spend it at a tech crunch? Where are they more likely to find maybe the next investor or their next customer? That gets to be kind of a tricky one to figure out. So I think that's what Health is wanting to their competition to be, the tech crunches of the world, rather than the HIMSS.
I have to say, if you're going to come to Health, you're going to have a good time, right?
Sure.
Can we talk about? So it's really interesting that the after parties. All right, we're going to talk about after parties here, but it's interesting to see folks are really partnering and aligning on the after parties. In the past, it would be like, oh, this is one brand's after party, and you got to go to that.
Right.
But now brands are coming together, and I think with all the layoffs, folks are starting to realize we need to be a little bit more financially responsible. And I think that's one of the things driving some more strategic partnerships with how people market, which is very unique to think about the fact that, you can co-market with other companies in a similar space, but maybe not directly competitive with you, and you save some money, and it's the same effect.
Are you thinking about the Elation and Zeus after party tonight?
Maybe. I think it has two other companies on that.
You're You're too young, and then you're going to go to ludicrous, right?
We'll see.
But it is interesting thought that, maybe this is a trend in marketing that is not just health related, but overall something bigger. Are we going to see more co-marketing efforts in healthcare that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, especially given the amount of spend that's happening at some of these, evening events where, you're in a very expensive, swanky Las Vegas location, and it's all the food and all the drinks and everything's very high quality. I mean, that's a lot to ask for one organization to be spending your marketing dollars. I mean, to get to another point that I wanted to talk about here, that there's certainly some companies that you wonder, you've never heard these companies' names before, and all of a sudden, they're on every billboard on the Las Vegas Strip, and they're in the healthcare technology space. Like, what is going on? To invoke a little bit of the olive that we saw at Vive last year, who's the next one of those? And I've never heard of this company before. What do they do? So. Yeah. And can they even explain it to you when you go and ask them?
So many dollars have been spent on this event. That is for sure.
It's almost like, for 3 years, nothing was spent. Now it's like, boom, or dump it, or, that could be. Those are really interesting, big picture, I think, kind of questions you have to ask yourself, especially our years of experience with going to HIMSS, where a few companies just dominate the landscape and everybody else gets lost.
Yeah, and 3-tiered.
Yeah, that does not happen
That's
here.
Not happening here.
Certainly, I remember those days very well. The days of the triple decker Cerner booths or McKesson. But in those days, to me anyway, it tended to be limited to the companies that were already the big gorillas in the space, right? And so what seems weird to me at Vive and then now at Health is these companies that you've never heard of before, and all of a sudden they're splashed everywhere. So
it's like, where'd that money come from?
Yeah, where'd that money come from? How long is that going to stay?
How long is it gonna last,
what are their whatever Series A investors thinking about? This way of spending their money. Anyway,
you guys are probably way too. I mean, it's a little reminiscent of me of the .com bust in 2000. Where people were spending crazy money on marketing, and it went from high to overnight, just
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I've been thinking about all week.
We are such a good band. Once again, we're we get it, right?
And from the PR perspective, one thing that I've been really excited to see is how much media has been here.
A lot.
They've
of
done
media.
tremendous
right.
outreach to media, giving caregiver grants, things so that folks can attend, and making it very easy for media to do their interviews here, have their conversations here. Media are having great, introductory kind of briefing kind of conversations, like putting a face to a name. And it's very exciting to see, because I think, in COVID, we obviously couldn't get together, and there's a lot of virtual and, there's a lot of new journalists, up and coming journalists in the health tech space, and they're, getting their bearings, and they're really starting to put faces to names and figure out, how folks fit together and fit in the landscape. And it's exciting to see that, because we haven't seen a lot of media attending. They've had travel bans, et cetera, and those have been lifted for the most part, and analysts as well, to attend these events and to really understand the landscape in a more personal way.
Yeah, I don't really remember seeing the presence of Axios and Yahoo Finance and all of that.
Well, even Politico is a great example.
Yeah,
they never had a health tech, really. They would have a healthcare person, but never really health. Now they have a full health tech newsletter with 4 journalists on it, and it's that's a new one, right? And that's great. We love to see that.
And this to me is the brilliance of the swankiness, I guess, if you will, of making health tech sexy to the investment community, the media community, because the truth of the matter is healthcare is personal to everyone. We're all patients, right? And so what's going on with your health should be relevant, and what's going on in the industry should be relevant to everybody. It should be accessible to everybody. And I think that's kind of what the Vive and Health are sort of bringing to this industry, is that accessibility to folks that were not necessarily interested and grounded in what was going on before.
Yeah.
A couple other conversations that I've been hearing, which has been really interesting, folks that I've thought to be long-time competitors having conversations and saying, we're both going to the same place. We both have the same goal. how can we align?
Right.
And they're direct competitors, but they're saying, no, wait, we both do this and we both have these huge networks. How can we align and still stay separate? Maybe at some point in an acquisition, merger, whatever. But at this point, it's conversations like, we have the same goal to make care better or to reduce friction or to do X, Y, Z. How can we align? And it's been cool to see. And, the hallways and folks like, I can't believe they're talking to each other. Right. And then asking them after, so what was that about? And we're going to try to work together.
Nice.
And it's cool to see
the investment community brings that as well, because if you're investing in a portfolio of different companies, you want that kind of, I hate to use the word synergy, but those sort of additive benefits to happen between those companies to make it all work together better.
Absolutely. Final thoughts.
I would say, health is absolutely a show people should check out. I think whether you're in healthcare IT, you're in pharma, life sciences, I think could have even more of a say here, whether you're B2B or B2C or B to anyone. I think that it has a space for everyone just because of the kind of aura of inclusivity that it has. I would say come prepared to meet folks outside of your side of things. Like if you're health IT, expect to meet folks that are, in pharma, and expect to have conversations about what it might look like to work together. What does it look like to be, in this industry but in separate sides? I think that's something that you can kind of anticipate and come ready to have fun. That's for sure.
Absolutely, come ready to have fun. I mean, for us, we definitely have made the decision that this is going to be on our circuit of trade shows and conferences that we go to during the year. For us, it's super valuable to have something the second part of the year to keep that connection in front of people, and quite frankly, to see what's happening, not just in the direct health IT space, but health in general, where things are moving in the world of health. I mean, one of the really interesting things that we saw today was a company called Hurdle, I believe. Hurdle, yeah. And they're basically like a drop shipping company for lab tests. So you're on a telehealth visit with your doctor, and instead of sending you to your local lab, they just press a button and you get a lab kit shipped to your home so that you can do whatever that test is at home. I mean, I'm giving free advertising to this company now, but just these really interesting new models, and it's that's the kind of model of where things are going to go.
Right. I've been seeing companies too, just AI, digital biomarkers, automation in every kind of turn, and it's really cool to see that, because there is some type of hope in that. Maybe things will get better and easier, maybe care will be less, full of friction if we can have software take care of some of the manual workload that's burdening everybody.
Right. Well, obviously, we're going to have another reunion in Vive in Nashville, right? 2023.
Absolutely.
Can't wait. James, Grace, thanks again.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been great.
You can learn more about James Aita at Metacomp.com and follow him on Twitter at HealthTechJames, and find Grace at acmarketingpr.com and on Twitter at High Tea with Grace, with the HI standing for Health IT. You can learn more about this show on healthcarenowradio.com. Have a topic or guest suggestion for the show? Email me at carol@healthcarenowradio.com, and be sure to connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Until next time, I want to know, what's your tagline?